Hi everyone, this is Sanjna from Mockat, and today we are sharing the news for the 20th December, continuing our series to help you prepare for your WAT and PI and get through IIMs and other top B schools. Now, the underlying news articles for all of these are there at mockat.com in our news segment, and the link is there in the description and our first pinned comment. So for today, here's the news that every MBA grad and every manager should know. So the first thing that we are going to look at is how the Israel-Hamas conflict is impacting business in the Red Sea. Second, RBI has disagreed with the points which the IMF has brought about. So we'll look at the key points on the key discussion around that. Reuters says that despite the digital payment boom, despite demonetization, cash still rules in India. So we'll look at some stats around this. We also have Montek Singh Ahluwalia's view, who agrees that yes, GDP can grow at 7.5% and gives the way forward. And in the last news is Ford actually rethinking their exit and wanting to come back to India. Now, how the Israel-Hamas conflict is impacting business. One of the primary reasons for this is that the Red Sea route, which is one of the most significant global shipping routes because it connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Indian Ocean via the Suez Canal, is getting impacted. And the Suez Canal, while it's a narrow strait, it actually 12% of global trade goes through it. So the impact of this route is something which is considerably significant. Now, what's happening is tensions have risen as a spillover of the Israel-Hamas conflict, and the Houthi militants particularly, who are militants from Yemen, they have attacked or seized multiple commercial ships. And as a result, AP Moller Maersk and even British Petroleum confirmed that some shipping lines have halted ships on this route. One of the key impacts that has happened here is that oil prices have risen as a result. Now, these Houthi militants are basically fighting a civil war with the Yemen government, but now they are saying that they are attacking any ship which has links to Israel. The ship need not actually be from or to Israel, but if it has any links, they have confirmed that they are attacking it. As a result of this, US along with 38 other countries has launched the Operation Prosperity Guardian, which has been confirmed by their Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. Now, these countries along with US include India, UK, Sri Lanka, Australia, Pakistan, Egypt, France, Germany, Bahrain, Yemen, and multiple other countries, with the idea being that this area has to be patrolled and policed, and any militant action has to be stopped. The next news is about IMF's view on forex intervention, which the RBI has come up with, and RBI's response to it. Now, IMF has said that India's interventions in the forex market likely exceeded levels which are needed to address disorderly market conditions. And as a result of RBI actions, the rupee USD exchange rate has been moving within a narrow range since October 2022. They've also reclassified our exchange rate regime from a floating exchange rate regime to a stabilized arrangement. The RBI has disagreed, saying that IMF is selectively picking data over a set of few months instead of looking at the complete picture. And RBI has said that the exchange rate is still market determined and any interventions on the forex side are transparent. Now, while this is a disagreement which is there and there are views on both sides, overall, IMF has definitely praised India's strong economic growth. They have cautioned us on the high debt to GDP ratio, which is again something which the government feels that their prediction is on the higher side. But overall, the IMF is fairly positive about India's economic growth. Now, let's understand why cash rules despite the digital payment boom. Now, in November 2016, the government had brought in demonetization where over 90% of the currency notes were not to be accepted. This was initiated to reduce black money and increase tax compliance, both, of course, extremely good aims, despite the temporary inconvenience and issues which happened. Having said that, cash usage continues to rise. The velocity has slowed, which is to say the growth has slowed, but cash in circulation has still increased. For instance, it was 12.7% in the 2011 to 2020 decade, but in 2020-2021, the cash in circulation was about 16.6%. At the same time, digital transactions are also increasing, especially as more and more people have access to smartphones and debit cards. Welfare transfer, all of the subsidies are basically done digitally, and UPI itself is a massive contributor. Now, while cash is something which is around 16% of GDP, UPI transactions are actually the equivalent of almost one third of India's GDP, because of which India has accounted for 46% of all global digital payments. Some would actually term this a paradox because digital payments as well as cash usage is on the rise. Cash still accounts for 13 to 14% of GDP during 2021 and 21-22. The primary reasons are households or families tend to keep cash. It's you still used a lot for a lot of small ticket transactions. A lot of election contributions are made in cash. In fact, there is a criticism of the BJP government saying that the digital bonds which have been brought in for the electoral bonds are actually not a good measure, and hence there is still a lot of cash which is used for electoral contribution. A lot of real estate transactions also continue to be in cash. So these are some of the primary reasons why cash usage has still not reduced. Now let's understand how the Indian GDP can grow at 7.5%. This is a higher rate than what we have currently, but Montek Singh Ahluwalia, who's one of the most respected financial advisors, feels that this is something which can be done, and this is something which can be done at 7.5% for the next decade or so, not just for a year. He does say that this is building on the reforms which have been brought in over the last 30 plus years, and what he recommends is the government needs to focus on exports and improve our infrastructure and logistics. He specifically mentions that infrastructure and logistics are not as fast paced in India as possible. Turnaround times are slow. These are things which countries like China, Bangladesh, and Vietnam have been much better. So there's definitely room for improvement, and that would lead to a higher GDP growth rate. In the interview, he was also questioned if he agrees with Mr. Raghuram Rajan, the former RBI governor, who had said that a 5 trillion GDP by 2025 is not feasible. And he explained that yes, it makes sense because the current GDP growth rate is actually 6.5% according to the government stats. And of course, we need to grow at about 13% to reach 5 trillion. So he does agree that a 5 trillion GDP might not be possible, but he is quite positive about potential GDP growth. Certain other things which he mentioned: a K-shaped recovery where the rich and the richer people do well, whereas the poorer people are hit. This is something which we need to avoid. But he was also positive. He did mention that unemployment was hit by COVID, but now it's back to normal levels. He mentioned that real wages need to increase, so which is essentially the growth in salaries and in wages minus the inflation aspect. And he also said that it doesn't make sense to have export bans on food items such as rice, because this is something which impacts farmers. There are other ways to ensure that prices are held stable. He recommends that inflation is better targeted by the RBI by looking at rates instead of having bans. He also mentioned that around exports there's a lot which India can do. He says that while we are working on a lot of bilateral FTAs, he did want India to join the RCEP or at least the CPTPP or other forums where multiple countries have come together, and that is something which would really help to boost exports. Now, in the last news for the day, let's find out if Ford is rethinking their Indian exit. So a couple of years back, Ford had decided to exit India. It had exited PLI, it had exited the JV, and it had also planned to sell its factories. In fact, it has sold some of them. But now it was supposed to sell its Tamil Nadu plant to JSW Group, but it has halted that sale and pulled out of the deal. So this has fueled speculation that Ford might be considering re-entering India. And India, of course, is the world's third largest auto market, so there's a lot of scope. In addition, PLI is something which could help. There's a rising focus on EVs. That is also something which could help. However, Ford has neither confirmed nor denied it, and they have not explicitly stated what they you're trying to do. So that's it for today. Now, the news articles are there in the description and the first pinned comment. We're planning to bring in a lot more around what is the key important news of the entire year, what are other things that you should prepare for based on your profile, and of course, general WAT-PI questions. So definitely subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and all the best.